Sup folks, welcome to the part 15, of What If Deku Become a Healer Hero, Chapter 40. Focus, Midoriya-kun. Recovery girl says sharply. Izuku startles out of his wandering thoughts for the third time that day. Sorry, recovery girl. He apologizes, hastily continuing to fill in the mock test she created for him. His mentor frowns in disapproval. Your exam is tomorrow, she says. I don't know what you're so distracted about, but push it out of your mind until after you've gotten your license. Of course, Izuku immediately obliges, but internally he sighs. He wishes it was that easy. God, he can't believe he fell asleep on Todoroki. Cuddling is one thing, but that he might as well have taken the friendship cake Todoroki made and thrown it up. He's so embarrassed. He almost couldn't even bring himself to drag his sorry ass out of bed this morning. He was too scared to go down to the first floor for breakfast in fear of coming across Todoroki, so he just stayed in his room and ate snacks that he had stored until it was time to go to training, then all but bolted out the door. Izuku stifles a sigh, struggling to focus on his task at hand while his mind is busy running circles around Todoroki. There's only the barest sliver of hope for him and their friendship in the fact that Todoroki is rather naive when it comes to social intimacy. So he might not even be aware that Izuku falling asleep on him was a pretty gay thing to do. Or that their whole cuddle session was maybe a little too cuddly to be considered normal for friends. Izuku can still hope. The next sigh is a bit harder to stifle. He feels recovery girl's stern glare prickling his skin and ducks his head. He does his best to not think about Todoroki throughout the rest of the day. Recovery girl is right, he really does need to concentrate on preparing for tomorrow's exam. It's probably one of the most important tests he'll ever take in his life, but despite his efforts to focus, his mind keeps wandering back to the bicolored boy. It's frustrating, and it's exactly what he wanted to avoid. He knew he would get distracted by Todoroki. That's why he told himself to just be friends, to not try and pursue anything romantic because it wouldn't lead anywhere anyways, and look what happened. His provisional license exam is tomorrow, and all he can think about is Todoroki. God, he's such an idiot. Izuku grits his teeth and stubbornly ignores the sharp ache in his heart. He pushes through the day, treating the decent number of hero students, from first to third years, that come in with injuries from their training. He's just in the middle of healing Monoma, who hurt himself trying to use two quirks at once, when the person he least wants to see enters. Only a minor setback, of course, the blonde is saying in a gloating tone. I've already perfected 3 ultimate moves. Izuku is busy analyzing his dislocated finger, but he lets false awe color his voice as he drawls. Really? 3? Normally he doesn't really mind flattering his hero patients to make them easier to deal with, but today his heart's not really in it. Thankfully, Monoma still seems to buy it and tosses his head with a smug smirk. Yeah, he says, tomorrow's exam will be a breeze. No doubt. I just feel bad for the other examinees, they don't even know what. He suddenly cuts himself off and Izuku glances up to his face twisting into a too wide grin. Oh ho ho. What's this? The strongest student in Class 1A got injured? Izuku's eyes widen and he whips his head around. Todoroki is standing in the doorway of the infirmary, his face a bloodied mess. Their eyes meet. Isn't that weird? I thought Class A was supposed to be better than Class B? What's their star student doing here? Isn't that weird? Why are you? Izuku sets Monoma's finger without warning. The blonde lets out a strangled yelp and Izuku quickly heals him with his quirk. Alright, time to go back to class, Monoma-kun, he says, struggling to keep his voice light and airy. Monoma flexes his finger and opens his mouth to complain about the rough treatment, but there must be something in Izuku's expression because he seems to realize that that was an order and not a suggestion. He glances at Todoroki with an arched brow, then looks back at Izuku, then smirks and turns away with his nose in the air. He attempts to shoulder check Todoroki on his way out, but the taller boy steps aside to let him pass, keeping his eyes on Izuku the entire time. The Greenet can't tell if it's nerves that make his heart flutter, or something else. God, he wishes Recovery Girl hadn't just stepped out to make a call a couple of minutes ago. Nothing good ever happens when he and Todoroki are alone lately, and after last night, Izuku can hardly stand to look at the other boy without wanting to melt into a puddle of sheer embarrassment. There's a long pause, and then Todoroki's thick, nasally voice breaks the silence. "Can I come in?" He sounds so different than usual that it's enough to jerk Izuku back to attention. Todoroki's nose is clearly broken and is bleeding pretty heavily. Startling, Izuku goes into healer mode and immediately ushers him inside, ordering him to sit on one of the beds while he pulls out gauze from the cabinet. "How did this happen?" he asks, gently pressing the gauze to his nose. Todoroki winces slightly and replies, "Bakugo was practicing one of his ultimate moves on a big rock and he accidentally, blasted it into my face." Izuku rolls his eyes and sighs, "Kaken. It was an accident." Todoroki shrugs. "Still, he should be more careful," Izuku says, trying to wipe away the blood so he can see the break better. He leans closer, tilting Todoroki's chin with his other hand as he analyzes the injury. "It doesn't seem too bad, actually. Most of the blood is coming from scratches from the rock. He could set the break itself pretty easily." Todoroki's eyes flicker up to his. He suddenly realizes just how close they are as he peers at the other boy's face and jerks away, a flush creeping up his neck. He mentally scolds himself. This is so unprofessional. Right now, before anything else, Todoroki is his patient. He should do damn well to remember that. Focus on his injuries and then anything else can come afterwards. Inhaling sharply, he straightens up and forces himself to keep a professional tone as he says, "It doesn't look too bad, so I'm just going to set it now, unless you'd prefer to wait for Recovery Girl to come back in a few minutes. If not, then I'll go ahead, and I'll try not to make it hurt too much, but you might get a gush of blood before I heal you, so get ready with that gauze, alright?" Todoroki nods. "Alright." He and Izuku switch out holding the gauze and the freckled boy gets to work on setting his nose. A quick push, a wince, and small energy transfer later, and Todoroki's nose is as good as new. Izuku takes the now blood-soaked gauze from Todoroki and drops it into the trash can. Then, he grabs a fresh one and starts carefully wiping away the rest of the blood off of Todoroki's face. It's not really something he pays much mind to, it's something he would do with anyone because blood is kind of gross and he doesn't like to leave a mess, but, well, it does go a bit beyond his job to clean up heroes. He doesn't even really realize he started to do it until about 10 seconds and when he drags the gauze over where Todoroki's scar once was. Izuku freezes. Todoroki's face is in his hand, the boy sitting still and compliant in front of him. His lashes gray on the right, red on the left flutter as he blinks. Heterochromatic eyes watching him with a sharp, attentive gaze, as if calculating and analyzing his every movement. Izuku swallows, his mouth going dry. It's a familiar feeling, to be held hostage by those eyes. They make his hand shake slightly as he slowly forces himself to continue cleaning up Todoroki's face, unable to tear his gaze away from the other boys. The blood clears, but still, he remains trapped, feeling as if he's being held in a vice grip, some unseeable force keeping his eyes locked with Todoroki's. His hand is still on Todoroki's jaw, his fingertips just barely brushing his hair, and he knows from experience, that if he slid his hand back into his hair, it would be as soft as silk. Would Todoroki let him? It's a crazy thought, but with how close they were last night, and with the way he's looking at him now, some part of Izuku thinks maybe he just might. Then Todoroki starts to stand. It's slow. He just shifts, inching forward, sliding off the bed. But he's taller than Izuku, and the height difference between them suddenly seems a lot more noticeable now that they're so close to each other. Izuku has to take a step back to let him get on the ground, and that makes his hand slip off his face, And then the moment or whatever this charged tension between them was is broken and Izuku loses his nerve. Anxiety claws at his throat and he ducks his head, hastily backing away to give Todoroki space. His face burns and his chest feels terrifyingly tight, but he gives himself a mental shake and squeezes his eyes shut, forcing away the sting, and only opening them again when he feels like he has somewhat control over himself. When he lifts his head, he sees Todoroki still standing by the bed, looking at his reflection in the mirror on the wall. Izuku watches as he lifts his hand and touches the spot where his scar once was, then smiles softly. "It still surprises me sometimes," he says after a long moment of silence. "I'll roll out of bed in the morning, pass by a mirror, and have to do a double take." He lets out a quiet huff of laughter. Izuku knows he should smile in response, but he just watches warily. "But I'm glad it's gone," Todoroki continues, still gazing at his reflection with an odd look in his eyes. "My mother cried when she first saw me without it." A spike of fear goes through Izuku, but Todoroki doesn't seem upset. Instead, his soft eyes grow a little warmer. "It'll be easier now without it. There'll be no constant reminder of what happened. We've both truly forgiven each other. And we can move on now." Even though there isn't much inflection in his voice, he somehow sounds immensely relieved. Izuku's heart aches. Then, Todoroki turns to look at him. "It's all thanks to you," he says. Izuku startles and shakes his head. "Oh, no," Todoroki interrupts, hardly letting him get a word in. "Seriously, I owe everything to you." He takes a step towards Izuku, holding his gaze steadily as he says, "I would never have used my left side without you. I would have done exactly as you said and let my hatred for my father grow and hold me back and turn me into a bitter person." He takes another step. "And I would never have been brave enough to mend my bond with my mother. So seriously, Midoriya-kun." He stops in front of Izuku, gazing at him earnestly. "Thank you." Izuku blinks owlishly, feeling his jaw go slightly slack. Cheeks burning, he swallows and stammers, "Oh, you're welcome." He gives a wobbly smile, but on the inside he's a little confused. Where the hell did that come from? His gratitude is heartwarming. Definitely, but a little out of the blue. Izuku isn't sure what prompted it. Todoroki smiles back, but says nothing else. Silence falls between them. A bead of sweat trickles down Izuku's temple as his pulse flutters nervously. Why is Todoroki still here? Izuku already healed him, so what else does he want? Does he? Oh God, is he going to bring up what happened last night? Crap, of course, no, wonder he's not leaving. He's going to take advantage of the fact that they're alone and Izuku can't run away. Izuku can't run away, can he? He honestly considers it, but no, Todoroki is standing pretty close to him, too close, and Izuku's back is only an inch or so away from the bed, so he's trapped. As much as he doesn't want to, he has to have this conversation. Izuku shifts uncomfortably and bites his lip anxiously, dropping his gaze to the floor. He sighs. God, this is going to suck. Taking a deep breath, he looks up. Listen, Todoroki grabs his face and kisses him. Izuku's brain short-circuits. Stalls for about 5 seconds. Reroutes. Then, what the fuck? He shrieks in a broken voice, pushing Todoroki away so hard the other boy's back hits the opposite bed. Todoroki stumbles and stares at him with wide eyes as Izuku sputters, "You just you." He touches his tingling lips. Confusion and frustration finally reaches its breaking point and he screeches, "Todoroki-kun, what?" Todoroki stares like a deer caught in headlights. I'm so sorry. I thought I mean, is this not okay?" His alarmed voice suddenly takes on a hesitant tone that manages to cut through Izuku's panic. He goes still. "I thought after," Todoroki says uncertainly. His eyes glisten with some emotion, and it takes a moment for Izuku to realize that they're shining with hurt. His heart jolts. I thought after Kamino Ward." He trails off, but the unspoken things were different. Hangs in the air. Izuku gapes at him, head spinning as he processes his words. Does that mean? Yes. He squawks. Todoroki's head snaps up. I mean, yes. But what? I didn't think you thought and then you never got. He groans in frustration and clutches his head. I didn't know where I stood with you. I mean, during Kamino we were running on adrenaline and emotions were high and I don't know. I thought maybe it could have just been a heat of the moment, kind of thing, so I didn't want to assume anything, you know? He sighs, fidgeting. I don't know, I just didn't want to make you uncomfortable in case you didn't want that, too. He starts losing his confidence and trailing off because Todoroki is staring at him like he's insane. Are you crazy? Todoroki asks incredulously. Of course I want to be with you. He says this so resolutely, so matter-of-factly, like there's not a doubt in his mind that that is what he wants out of life, that for a moment Izuku's heart stops completely, unable to withstand the power of Todoroki's sheer will. His breath hitches and he feels dizzy. I felt bad, Todoroki continues. I took advantage of you when you were emotionally vulnerable and were literally bleeding to death and I wanted to. We did things out of order. He suddenly says the last part loudly and lets out a frustrated growl. Izuku blinks in confusion. Todoroki clenches his fists and averts his gaze. Sometimes I talk about you when I visit my mother. Izuku nearly has a heart attack at this. And sometimes my sister is there too, and my sister, she reads these shoujo mangas and they always talk about how you need to make a person like you first by talking to them and doing nice things for them and then you kiss them. So that's what I started doing. Todoroki's shoulders sag. But I guess I wasn't very good at it if you were so surprised by me kissing you again. Izuku's jaw is practically on the floor. His brain can hardly process what his ears are hearing. It doesn't make any sense. Shoujo mangas? Todoroki hasn't been copying from one of those, he's just been pretending like the kiss never even happened and very firmly sticking him in the friend zone. But now that Izuku thinks about it, that's what that was? Realization hits. Wait, so when you came to my room during move-in day, that wasn't just awkward small talk, you actually wanted to know just silly little details about my life. About my cat? Todoroki blanches. You thought it was awkward? Izuku winces apologetically, then his eyes widen. Wait, the cake too? That wasn't a friendship peace offering. Todoroki looks incredibly confused. You were trying to woo me, Izuku declares with a grin, pointing at Todoroki in triumph. The boy's confused expression turns into embarrassment and he flushes, averting his gaze. Izuku's heart melts. Todoroki-kun, he says softly, that's really sweet. Todoroki instantly perks up like a puppy, eyes brightening. A smile grows on Izuku's face without him needing to think about it and he ducks his head shyly. During move-in day, when we were alone in my room, you didn't say anything about the kiss, so I thought maybe you just wanted to forget about it. He explains. Todoroki shakes his head rapidly. No, I don't want to. I don't think I could even if I tried. He immediately shuts his mouth right after, ears tinging pink. Izuku can't help letting out a little giggle, immeasurable relief leaving him feeling like he's on cloud nine. Me neither, he rasps. Todoroki's eyes light up and he smiles. There's a brief moment of silence in which the two gaze at each other happily. Then, he gestures to Izuku and hesitantly asks, so, can I? Izuku blinks innocently, then his eyes widen in realization. Oh, right, yes. He glances around quickly, not quite knowing what to do with himself. Right, yeah, let's do that. So, just, okay, yeah, how should we? Todoroki is already striding across the space between the two beds. Nerves shoot up from Izuku's stomach into his throat and he feels a blush blossom across his face. Oh. Okay, cool, So then Todoroki's right in front of him and his hand is on his cheek, and wow, this is moving fast. Izuku knows his eyes must be wide-eyed saucers, and he clamps his mouth shut to prevent his heart from escaping his lips. But wait, should he open his mouth? No, that's for serious kissing, isn't it? How do people kiss? How the hell did he do this last time? Oh, fuck, Todoroki's face is really close now. Warm lips press against his. It's drier than last time. Probably due to the lack of blood and tears. They hold for a few seconds, and then Izuku thinks, now what? There's a soft puff of air against his skin, and Izuku suddenly remembers that he needs to breathe. That's probably why he's so dizzy. He exhales through his mouth and kind of ends up breathing directly on Todoroki's lips, which is a little weird, so he tries breathing through his nose instead. Much better. They have to put a small, half-centimeter of space between them in order to exhale, but Todoroki immediately presses their lips together again. His hand curves around Izuku's jaw, tilting his head slightly so that their noses aren't smashed together, and this angle is a lot more comfortable now. Their lips don't move much against each other, but when they break apart slightly, they go right back into another kiss. They're both hesitant, testing the waters to see what's okay and what's not. Izuku doesn't know what to do with his hands, but he kind of feels like he's 2 seconds away from passing out, so clinging to Todoroki for dear life sounds good. He slides hands up Todoroki's back and clutches his broad shoulders, digging his fingers into the hard muscle. In response, he feels Todoroki's free arm slip around his waist, and he nearly dies right then and there. The kiss deepens. Todoroki presses a bit closer and tilts his head so that Izuku's bottom lip catches between his. The freckled boy inhales, a pleasant tingling starting to pool in his stomach. This is actually beginning to feel quite nice. Todoroki's other hand starts to slide towards the back of Izuku's head, fingers tangling in his curls as he gently guides him into his kisses. He seems to want to take the lead, and Izuku is more than willing to follow, but something niggles in the back of his mind. After a few moments, he reluctantly pulls away and pants, "You're a lot better at this than the first time." Todoroki leans his forehead against his and whispers in a low, husky voice, "I googled it," before diving in to kiss him again. Izuku struggles not to laugh. Todoroki kisses him a bit more insistently this time. There's still some hesitance, and Izuku is still a little nervous, but he welcomes Todoroki enthusiastically, and the taller boy presses into him with a renewed eagerness. He steps closer, Izuku steps backwards, and his lower back hits the edge of the bed, and Todoroki steps closer still, leaning into him, forcing his head to tip back even further as he devours his mouth. Their lips move against each other, slowly at first, then they become a bit bolder, more demanding. Fingers tangle in Izuku's curls, pulling lightly at his scalp, and a little shiver of pleasure causes his whole body to tremble. Todoroki makes a low noise in the back of his throat. There's a sudden sense of urgency in the air. Todoroki kisses him like he's finally eating a dessert that he's been waiting ages for, relentlessly claiming his lips over and over again like he can't get enough. Izuku feels like he's about to be swept away by the storm that is Todoroki's shadow, and by God, he is not complaining. Teeth gently nip at his lower lip and Izuku's breath hitches, sparks shooting down his spine. A warm, wet tongue flicks briefly over the nipped spot, soothing it, and Izuku is starting to feel a little lightheaded. He pulls away slightly, just to readjust, to give him some space to breathe, to think, but Todoroki chases after his lips persistently, determined to make his head spin endlessly. Izuku clings to his shoulders like a lifeline as the coiling pressure in his stomach increases with every breath Todoroki steals from him. The arm wrapped around his lower back keeps him firmly trapped against Todoroki's chest, the taller boy practically bending him backwards as he leans him towards the bed. All of the sudden, their pelvises rub together just so, and a jolt of electricity goes through Izuku, a strangled whine escaping his lips. Todoroki lets out a guttural groan too and rolls his hips against his again, making Izuku hiss and dig his fingers into the hard muscles of his shoulders. Every inch of him is surrounded by Todoroki. By his end, his touch is overwhelming. It's too much, it's not enough. A foot steps between his legs. Todoroki reaches down with his hand to press his hip against the mattress and Izuku, do you know where? What the fuck? Izuku immediately jerks away from Todoroki with a wet plop and whips his head around to see Kaken standing in the doorway. The blonde's face is white as a sheet, his jaw slack in shock and his expression a mix of pure, unadulterated horror and disgust. Then, Kirishima's friendly face pops over his shoulder. When his eyes land on Izuku and Todoroki's compromising position, he breaks out into a toothy grin. Oh, hell yeah, finally. Izuku's cheeks burn. Kaken just keeps staring at them with wide, horrified eyes. What the fuck? He whispers, aghast. Kirishima, on the other hand, just keeps grinning. Yeah, get him, Todoroki-kun. He cheers, flashing him a thumbs up. I'll take care of this guy. Hardening himself, Kirishima wraps his arms around a stunned Kaken's chest and starts dragging him away, closing the door behind him with his foot. There's a moment of silence, then wait a minute, wait a fucking minute, get your fucking paws off him, you bastard. The door shudders violently as Kaken starts banging against it and, from the sounds of it, starts trying to blow it up. There's a grunt, and then sounds of scuffling occur as Kirishima presumably tackles him. Bro, I thought you wanted this to happen. I didn't think he'd actually fucking do it. Fuck off, it's not funny anymore. The grunting and explosions continue. Izuku stares at the door in dismay. Somebody please kill him. Please, can the earth just open up and swallow him whole right now? Todoroki, who hasn't moved a single inch and is still pinning Izuku against the bed by his hips, gazes at the door for a few moments, seeming entirely unconcerned by the interruption, before he turns back to Izuku and leans forward to kiss him again. Todoroki-kun. Izuku sputters, turning his face away. But Todoroki doesn't stop. He just plops his forehead down on Izuku's shoulder and pouts. Izuku's heart flutters, but the sounds of Kaken and Kirishima's scuffling are too close for his comfort. They're right outside, he tells him. It should be the end of it. Obviously, they can't make out with their friend's mere feet from them. But when Izuku tries to squirm out of Todoroki's grip, the taller boy still doesn't let him go. Izuku hears him grumble unintelligibly under his breath. Todoroki-kun, he says chastisingly, come on. Todoroki's hands flex on his hips, and his hair drags along his shoulder as he moves his head closer to his neck. Izuku can feel the hot puff of his breath on his collarbone. He swallows, suddenly growing nervous. We're in the infirmary, he says a little dizzily, this is inappropriate. Todoroki responds by kissing his neck and Izuku gasps, squirming even more. To Todoroki-kun. Oh, his breath hitches when Todoroki's lips pepper kisses over the scarred skin of his throat. Come on now, Todoroki-kun, that's enough, he stutters breathlessly, shuddering in the other boy's grasp. He tries to crane his head away, but that only gives more for Todoroki to kiss. His lips find a particularly sensitive spot underneath Izuku's ear and the freckled boy jolts, squealing, recovery girl will be back any second. Finally, that seems to deter Todoroki enough for him to stop. Izuku lets out a sigh of relief as he pulls away, but the other boy looks so utterly disgruntled at having to do so that Izuku can't help but giggle. His heart softens a little. Well, if Todoroki really has been trying for so long to woo him, can he really blame the guy for getting a bit carried away? Smiling shyly, Izuku leans up on his tippy toes and gently kisses Todoroki on the forehead. We can, continue that another time, he says, blushing nervously. Todoroki perks up. The door slides open. Do I even want to know why there are scorch marks on my door? Recovery girl asks, eyeing said door, warily as she walks in. Todoroki quickly steps away from Izuku and the latter immediately straightens up, trying to subtly fix his rumpled clothing without his mentor noticing. Oh. Izuku glances at the empty hallway. Kirishima must have somehow dragged Kaken away. Kaken was here and he was, a little upset. Recovery girl sniffs. Glad I missed that, then. Sorry I was gone for so long. Dr. Okada-san kept yammering on. As she starts walking over to her desk, she glances pointedly at Todoroki. And you? Are you injured or? Todoroki startles. Oh. No, he fixed me. I'll go now. He glances at Izuku, then quickly looks away. Bye. He disappears without another glance at either of them, leaving Izuku alone with Recovery Girl. The Greenet shifts uncomfortably, all too aware of the flush in his face and how messy his clothes and hair must be. His mentor gazes after Todoroki for a moment, an extra wrinkle in her brow, then turns to look at him. Dread curls in his stomach, and he prays to whatever god there is out there that she doesn't figure it out. But apparently the world is cruel and there is no god, because then her eyes widen ever so slightly in realization, and Izuku is doomed. You know what, it's almost 4 p.m. Izuku says, glancing at the clock. 15 minutes till. Close enough, he can clock out early, can't he? So, can I just go? Please. Recovery Girl is feeling merciful today, because her face smooths into neutral amusement as she nods and says, yes, you may go. Thank you. Izuku gathers his things with lightning speed, not noticing that Recovery Girl has gotten up and made her way back across the room until she's meeting him at the door as he's escaping into the hallway. And Midoriya-kun? Yes. He turns around, his stomach sinking at the sight of the twinkle in his mentor's eyes. She smiles. I know Todoroki-kun is very cute, but please keep any intimate activities out of my office. Thank you. The door closes in his face. Izuku buries his face in his hands and lets out a long, pitiful groan of embarrassment. Katsuki wants to burn his eyes out. The image of icy hot chewing on Izuku's face as he pins him to the bed is seared into his brain, making the blonde want to puke his guts out, and then blast the half-and-half bastard all the way across Japan. How fucking dare he? His pupils narrow into pinpricks, fiery, hot rage pooling into his veins. I am going to kill that motherfucker, he hisses as he stomps through the hallway, hackles raised. Shitty hair appears at his side, jogging to keep up. Oh, come on, man, it's not that bad. Katsuki whips his head towards him. Not that bad? Not that bad? He snarls in his face, he was fucking swapping spit with Izuku. Shitty hair blinks, sweat dropping, and laughs nervously. Haha, yeah, but, you know. It seemed like he was having a good time? Katsuki's eye twitches and Shitty hair throws his hands up. Midoriya-kun, I mean. Katsuki bares his teeth and swings back around, continuing to stomp down the hall. Izuku is too soft-hearted for his own good, he'd fall for any moron with a pretty face, he growls dismissively, then narrows his eyes. But that bastard fuck, after everything, I thought maybe he cuts himself off, gritting his teeth as he glares at the ground. He thought icy hot fucking understood. Yeah, he knew the guy had a thing for Izuku, but that was just something to laugh at, an annoyance at most when the bastard got a little too close for comfort. He didn't think he'd actually act on it, he thought he understood what Izuku is to him. He thought he respected that enough not to act on it. But Katsuki has laid out all of his insecurities before him, he knows just how important Izuku is to him, he knows all of this, and Katsuki grits his teeth, a sharp sting that feels far too close to betrayal pricking his heart. Damn it, he hisses under his breath. Shitty hair watches him silently. There's a hint of confusion in his eyes, but he simply plasters on a smile and puts a hand on Katsuki's shoulder. Hey, man, all that's important is Midoriya-kun's happiness, right? He asks. Katsuki glances at him sharply. Shitty hair tilts his head, gazing at him imploringly. That's all you want, isn't it? For him to be happy? He thinks of new scars, of dark circles under tired eyes, of a haunted gaze after a bad nightmare, of all the lingering effect of his failure of fucking course I do. He snaps. Good. Shitty hair smiles. Then it shouldn't be that hard. He shrugs. I mean, I know you don't really like Todoroki-kun, but honestly, I think he could be really good for Midoriya-kun. But why the fuck does he need him? Why the fuck am I not enough for him? Kaken blurts out, then snaps his jaws shut. Shitty hair hardly skips a beat though, and immediately shakes his head. It's not that you're not enough. No way, man. He meets Katsuki's agitated gaze and gives him a cocky grin. It's just that you don't bake him shitty cakes or walk into walls at the sight of his delicious ABS or nearly burst into flames when he falls asleep on your shoulder. He laughs. It's just different, man. You can like people in different ways, you know? He sobers up slightly, his smile growing softer as he gazes at Katsuki. And what you have with Midoriya-kun, that will always be yours. I mean, Todoroki-kun's not gonna take that away from you. He couldn't, even if he tried. You guys have been by each other's side all your lives, and you'll always be there for him, so, you know. Shitty hair scratches the back of his head, struggling to find his words, before he just gives up and says, you've got nothing to worry about. Katsuki stares at him, processing his words. What he has with Izuku. Icy hot words echo in his ears. I know you have something special with him and I respect that, believe me, I do. He and Izuku do have something special, something that even Icy hot himself has acknowledged. Years of being by each other's side, of playing together, of fighting, learning, growing. Of course Todoroki can't take that away from him. Did he really think that a pretty face and a few weeks of awkward flirting would replace years of friendship and loyalty? No way. Shitty hair is right, he doesn't have anything to worry about. The knot in his chest loosens slightly, and he starts to feel a little stupid. Of course Izuku wouldn't replace him with Icy hot. He may find him charming or whatever, but what they've got is different. Katsuki blinks. What they've got is different. He glances at Shitty hair. The redhead's friendship with him is a strange one. For some reason, Shitty hair seems to actually like him, and for some other reason, Katsuki actually seems to like him back. He can be incredibly stupid and annoying at times, but Katsuki found himself relying heavily on his cheer to keep him calm during Izuku's rescue. He's not emotionally stunted enough to not be able to admit his own feelings to himself. Being able to admit them to other people is another matter entirely. But as he trudges through the hallway with the redhead, he thinks of the way he likes Shitty hair versus the way he likes Izuku. They're wildly different, but both ways are equally important to him. The emotions aren't stronger on one side, even though he kind of feels like they should be since he's known Izuku longer, but he really likes Shitty hair and he can't imagine his life without the idiotic redhead in it. So it must be the same for Izuku then. The way he likes Icy hot. It's the same way Katsuki likes Shitty hair. And even though Izuku may hold him and Icy hot the same value in emotions, he's not being replaced by Icy hot. Because it's like they're not even competing in the same field. Katsuki clenches his jaw. Icy hot. He thinks of the way Izuku looks at him with his sparkling eyes, how Icy hot's gaze softens at the sight of him. He thinks of how he made sure to include him in the rescue plan because he knew how important it would be to him, even though he could have gone ahead with the others without him. He thinks of the pain in his voice when he talked about how he failed to protect Izuku. He thinks of his determination to get Izuku back, and how it rivaled his own. How he did the most important thing of all, the thing that Katsuki still has trouble doing when it comes to Izuku. He succeeded. How he got all protective over him during the movie night and insisted on carrying him to bed, even when Katsuki teased and challenged him in front of everyone. And the thing is, for all his taunting and nagging, Icy hot never let Katsuki push him around, never let him push him away from Izuku. Katsuki can begrudgingly respect that. It shows that he's not a little bitch that will run away as soon as things get hard. It shows that he's serious about this. Katsuki grits his teeth. Fuck. He doesn't like this. Part of him feels he's losing Izuku, in a way. And he still doesn't like Icy Hot one bit. But, if Izuku's going to be dating anyone, then as his best friend it's Katsuki's duty to make sure that he's going to be treated like a goddamn prince. So, he lets out a slow, steady exhale, and says in a deadly calm voice, I need to have a talk with Icy Hot. Okay. Shitty hair nods, eyeing him warily, just. Don't kill him please? No promises. They reach Heights Alliance, and Katsuki stations himself right outside Icy Hot Storm waiting for the other boy to arrive. As soon as he steps out of the elevator and their eyes meet, Katsuki fixes him with a glare and jerks his thumb over his shoulder. Inside. Now. He growls. Icy Hot nods, expressionless, and moves to open his door. Katsuki follows him into his room, casting a quick, judgmental glance at the tatami flooring, before Icy Hot turns to face him. He inclines his head, signaling him to speak. Katsuki levels him with a glowering look. Not 10 minutes ago, he was playing tonsil hockey with Katsuki's precious childhood friend. His lip curls. Listen here, you candy cane prima donna, because I'm only gonna say this one fucking time, he spits, that shit was fucking disgusting, and I don't ever wanna see it again. Icy Hot stares at him, unfazed. Katsuki sneers, I still don't fucking like you, but for some reason, Izuku does. It boggles my fucking mind, really I don't get what he sees in you. You've been a pain in my ass since day one but of course you're the one I catch Izuku dry humping in the nurse's office. He lets out a sharp, bitter bark of laughter, gritting his teeth as he glares at Icy Hot. The other boy gazes at him impassively, his face carefully blank, like he's a fucking robot or something. It fills Katsuki's chest with hot rage. He's so different from Izuku. Izuku is emotional and soft-hearted and stubborn and far too kind for his own good, but it's his best quality, and how the hell will it work between someone like him and a stone-cold bitch like Icy Hot who doesn't feel a fucking thing? But that's not true. That's not true, and Katsuki knows it because he's seen past his cold exterior, broken down by failure that he knows all too well, and he's seen the wildfire crackling beneath, blazing with determination to save Izuku. He knows that Icy Hot is far from emotionless. And the icy facade only ever seems to melt when it comes to Izuku. Katsuki huffs through his nose, chest taking. Izuku. How does he do this to them? Doesn't even have a combative quirk, and yet he has such a terrifying amount of power over the two strongest students of Class 1A, probably everyone in Class 1A, if not the entire school at this point. It's just the effect he has on people. Katsuki has seen it throughout their entire lives, has watched people flock to Izuku like moths to an open flame, drawn to his genuine sweetness and warm smiles that he gives out so generously, like they don't make everyone's day just a bit brighter. And fuck, it's really a goddamn wonder Izuku hasn't been snatched up by someone sooner. Katsuki needs to make sure Icy Hot is damn well aware of just how fucking lucky he is that his friend has even decided to so much as lay eyes on him. Taking a deep breath, he growls in a low voice, I've known Izuku practically my entire life. I know him like the back of my fucking hand. I know that he is trusting, and that he is kind, and that he is more than you or I will ever deserve. He spits out the words, fixing the other boy with a fierce glare and ignoring the stinging in his eyes as he peels his lips back and snarls, I don't fucking like you, but I love him, and you're gonna fucking make him happy whether you like it or not. Midoriya Izuku is the best thing in our lives, so everything you do from here on out is for him, alright? Every battle you fight, every sacrifice you make, is for him. You're going to give him everything you have, and then more. You give him the best life. Fucking got it? His voice has risen to a shout by the end of it, and he glowers at Icy Hot with his teeth bared, waiting for him to respond. The other boy is silent, staring at him with slightly wide eyes, But after a moment his expression smooths out and he presses his lips together, giving a short, resolute nod. His eyes are steely with a silent promise. "Got it?" he says. Katsuki's nostrils flare. "Good." He snaps, then adds, "And if you break his heart, I'm blasting you to bits." Icy Hot nods again. "I wouldn't expect anything less from you." God, he's so fucking calm, it just makes Katsuki want to good. He whirls around, shoving his sweaty hands in his pockets. "Fucking bye, then." He stomps towards the door. Izuku would be upset if he blew up his new boyfriend. Admittedly, maybe Izuku should have known better than to go to Todoroki's room. With Kaken's room so close by, and the fact that he left the infirmary sooner than them, he probably should have been more wary. But he didn't hear any noises coming from the blonde's room, so he assumed that Kirishima took him somewhere else. It was only natural then that he would hope that perhaps he and Todoroki could perhaps continue where they had left off in the infirmary. But before he can even knock on the door, it swings open and Kaken appears on the other side. Izuku lets out an embarrassing squawk and stumbles back in surprise. Kaken doesn't even stop moving and just grabs him by the front of the shirt. "All right, you're next," he grunts, dragging him along as he turns and starts walking towards the Greenet's room. He opens the door, glaring at Izuku for leaving it unlocked, and pushes the stumbling boy inside. "Kaken." Izuku stammers, clumsily regaining his balance as he whirls around to see the blonde kicking the door closed behind him and fixing him with an irritated look. He swallows nervously. Congratulations or whatever on finally nailing Icy Hot," Kaken interrupts, wrinkling his nose distantly. Izuku flinches, cheeks heating up. "Kaken. That shit was disgusting," Kaken grunts, "keep it in your pants next time." Izuku's face burns even hotter. He opens his mouth to reply, but Kaken starts walking towards him, shoulders hunched, hands in his pockets. Before he can react, Kaken is right in front of him, dropping his forehead onto his shoulder with a soft sigh. Izuku goes still. A silence falls between them. For a few moments, neither of them speak. Izuku waits. "I know we already dealt with this shit earlier," Kaken says quietly against his shirt, "and I know I have no right to say this but..." There's a long pause before he finally says, "You're mine." He leans his head against the side of Izuku's neck, grumbling petulantly, "I've known you for almost 15 years, I think I have some right to say that." Izuku swallows and lets out a sigh, reaching up to wrap his arms around his back. He rests his chin on the blonde's shoulder, humming in thought. An old memory floats to the surface of his mind. "I'm going to become the best damn hero this world has ever seen, and you're going to become the best damn healer. And you are going to be mine." This isn't like that, though. Kaken has long since grown past that. They both have. Izuku inhales deeply, breathing in his friend's burnt sugar scent, and exhales, "I know. You do." He squeezes him briefly. "You're mine too," he giggles, then sobers up slightly, "but just because I'm gonna be with Todoroki-kun, I guess, that doesn't mean I'm gonna forget about you." "I know," Kaken grumbles. "You'll always be my bestest friend in the whole wide world," Izuku says teasingly. "I know," Kaken groans, a touch of annoyance in his tone as he sags his weight against him. He presses his lips together. "Had to say it." Izuku smiles and hugs him a bit tighter. Kaken finally takes his hands out of his pockets and wraps his arms around him as well. For a couple of minutes, the two friends simply stand there hugging, taking comfort in each other's embrace. Then, Izuku's eyes fly open. "Wait a minute," he says, "why were you in Todoroki-kun's room?" "Oh." Kaken shrugs. "I gave him my blessing." Izuku blinks in confusion. "You... what?" Chapter 41. Izuku anxiously wrings his hands as he does his best to take slow, deep breaths in an attempt to keep himself calm. From the concerned glance his mentor shoots him, he must not do a very good job. "Steady, Midoriya-kun," she says. "I know," he He replies a bit too quickly, then swallows, just nervous. "You'll do fine," Recovery Girl says with confidence that Izuku envies. "All you need to do is trust in your capabilities as a healer. And pass an exam with highly advanced medical knowledge that I haven't learned yet, plus do a physical demonstration of my quirk that I haven't fully mastered control over, all while being judged by a board of the most renowned healers in all of Japan now." Izuku winces when Recovery Girl gives him a light whack with her cane. "Enough with that sass, young man." She glares warningly and he averts his gaze. A moment later, he fidgets nervously again and looks up, letting out a noise of frustration. "Where are they?" he whines, glancing around the empty campus. "We're going to be late." "We're fine. We have plenty of time," Recovery Girl says patiently. "Relax." Izuku huffs. "They've been standing in front of this car for almost 3 minutes now." Which, alright, it's not that long of a wait, but come on, this is one of the most important days of his life. The least they could do is be on time. Much like his classmates, Izuku has to actually leave campus for his provisional license exam. It will be his first time leaving campus since moving in, and while his comings and goings outside of are severely restricted due to security as Aizawa said, his license exam is one of the situations deemed important enough for him to leave the school. Of course, they will be taking every security precaution necessary to ensure his safety, hence the car and the late heroes that he and Recovery Girl are currently waiting for. All Might had been the first to offer his protection, but being the #1 hero, he's too high profile, and both Recovery Girl and Principal Nezu had shot down the idea immediately. So now Present Mick and Midnight will be escorting Izuku to his provisional license exam, which he doesn't have a problem with, not at all, except it would be nice if they had All Might's speed because now they're 4 minutes late and he should stop tapping his foot. Recovery Girl is glaring again. Finally, after 5 minutes, the two heroes show up. "Sorry for the hold-up." Present Mick's loud greeting pierces shrilly in the early morning's tranquility as he approaches with Midnight. "Coffee maker was giving me some trouble." He waves the cup in his hand, then gestures to Izuku. "You want some, little listener?" "No, I'm fine," Izuku says a little impatiently. "You sure?" Present Mick asks, eyeing him up and down. "You kind of look like you could use some, no offense." He grins. "Couldn't sleep before the test, could you?" I'm fine, come on, let's go." Izuku blurts out, then flushes. "Midoriya-kun." Recovery Girl chastises. Midnight, however, laughs. "He's so eager." She chirps, eyes twinkling. "I like it. Come on. He's been waiting long enough for this, hasn't he? Let's not torture him any longer." She grabs the car door and opens it, gesturing dramatically for Izuku to enter. Izuku doesn't really know Midnight very well. She teaches his modern hero art history class, but aside from their interactions there, he doesn't really talk to her that much. But he decides right now that she's his favorite teacher at. He practically dives into the car, strapping himself into the back seat with lightning speed and watches as Recovery Girl slides into the seat next to him. The two heroes take the front seats, with Present Mick being the driver. In the back of his mind, Izuku wonders how good of an idea that is, but he doesn't voice the concern aloud. He already has too many other things to be worried about right now. Actually, not many other things. Just this one thing. This one giant thing that could very well determine his future after today. This morning had been rough. See, now that Izuku doesn't have to worry about his relationship with Todoroki anymore, his mind had more than enough space for the fresh wave of pure anxiety that came crashing down on him as soon as he woke up from one of his usual nightmares at 8 o'clock in the morning. It was a very delayed reaction, sure. He'd been worried about the exam all week, but he'd also been worried about a bunch of other things at the same time, and once those things were gone and he could focus all of his attention on the test that is suddenly right here, well, he kind of panicked. A little bit. It had been hard to calm down, and it had been even harder to resist the temptation to start trying to cram as much last-minute studying as he could. It probably wouldn't have helped, and Recovery Girl would have scolded him if she had found out. So instead he just tried to stay calm and do his best to focus on the task ahead, but he was also frustrated that he had allowed himself to become so distracted. For nearly 20 minutes he just sat on his bed panicking and beating himself up, thinking about all the times during the week when his mind was on Todoroki rather than on whatever he was supposed to be studying. All that wasted time. No, not wasted, not really, but it feels like it is now, with the exam looming right over him. He regrets every second that he didn't spend studying. This is what he was worried about, wasn't it? Getting distracted. And, as excited as he is about his new relationship with Todoroki, whatever it might be, his future takes precedence. So he pushed Todoroki firmly out of his mind and focused on what lies ahead. Thankfully, the other boy seemed to be just as determined to stay focused as he was today. He gave him a smile and made small conversation with him during breakfast, but other than that, things remained fairly normal between them. Izuku was grateful. Now in the car, finally beginning the journey towards the place where his license exam will take place, Izuku's stomach coils into knots. Apprehension of what's to come swells like a rising tide within him, and he doesn't do a very good job of hiding his anxiety from the adults, who do their best to calm him down, but no amount of reassurance is enough to ease his mind. President Mick tries to distract him with terrible jokes, but all that gets him is a glare from Recovery Girl and a jab in the ribs from Midnight. "Shut up and drive," she snaps, "let the ladies handle this." Eventually, Izuku's mentor manages to settle his nerves slightly by coming up with medical questions for him to answer. They're not that hard, and it's pretty obvious that she's only testing him on information that she knows he knows by heart, but as he answers her questions he finds himself being slightly reassured, or rather, reaffirmed, in his own intelligence. He knows a lot of things. Sure, he may be young and inexperienced, but he's been preparing for this exam for a long time, ever since he first met Recovery Girl. Really. He's learned so much over the past year. He knows he has the knowledge he needs in order to impress the board. He just needs to not freak out and forget it all. Recovery Girl's questions start to become a little bit more specific, but Izuku still answers them easily. He's immensely grateful for his mentor's comforting presence. Only she'd know the perfect way to both calm him down and keep his mind off of the exam looming ahead. It's also pretty funny to see the confused glances President Mick and Midnight share at some of the answers he gives to Recovery Girl. Soon, they begin to approach their destination. The testing is actually taking place in a large hospital that's a decent drive away from a very small amount of the human population have healing quirks, and an even smaller amount of those people are in Japan, and an even smaller amount of that small amount are 15 years old and ready to take their provisional license exams, so it doesn't make much sense for there to be a specific building for such a small niche. Members of Japan's medical board, healers with decades of experience, are all taking time out of their day to travel here and meet Izuku to evaluate him, to judge him, to decide if he's good enough to be a healer, or at least, good enough to take his first steps to be one. It's a terrifyingly overwhelming thought, and Izuku feels like he's going to be sick as they step out of the car and start walking towards the hospital. Recovery Girl's hand slides into his and gives it a quick squeeze. He inhales sharply, then lets out a slow breath. Don't panic. That will only make things worse. He's been preparing for this for a long time. He is a good healer. He knows this. Just stay focused and everything will be okay. He squeezes back. President Mick and Midnight walk on either side of him as they escort him and Recovery Girl into a smaller building next to the hospital. A little confused, Izuku glances around. They seem to be in some sort of lobby, modern looking and mostly empty except for a small group of people sitting on a few cushioned seats around a table. While they look to be in mid-discussion, they all glance up at their rival. Izuku's skin prickles when their eyes immediately land on him. Ah, there you are. An older gentleman in the group stands up and approaches them with an outstretched hand, a friendly smile on his face. "Recovery girl, it's good to see you again." Recovery girl steps forward and takes his hand, nodding politely. "It's good to see you too." She turns to Izuku. "Midoriya-kun, this is Dr. Edeno Shin." "Dr. Edeno-san, allow me to introduce my apprentice, Midoriya Izuku." Dr. Edeno looks at Izuku, still smiling. "Of course. The man of the hour," he says, sounding a little amused, but not mocking. He holds out his hand and Izuku takes it. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Midoriya Izuku." "It's a pleasure to meet you too, sir," Izuku replies, struggling to keep his weak voice steady. The rest of the board members that were with him come over as well. Recovery girl seems to be familiar with them all to some degree and they greet her first, making Izuku feel a little bit like an outsider, but their attention soon turns to the freckled boy, and that's a little worse. They introduce themselves briefly and Izuku shakes their hands, politely, doing his best to remember their names and positions and where they work. Their expressions are cool and professionally neutral, but Izuku can see thinly veiled curiosity in their eyes. He wonders if it's caused by all the drama from his kidnapping and subsequent rescue, or because his mentor talked him up to them when she was convincing them to come evaluate him. As much as he wants to believe it's the latter, part of him knows that it's the former. Once the formalities are over, they get down to business. Dr. Edeno claps his hands, getting everyone's attention. "All right then, let's get started, shall we?" He looks at Izuku. "We will, of course, be beginning with the written portion of the exam before moving on to the physical portion." Izuku nods, and then Dr. Edeno goes on to instruct him on what to do for the written portion. It's stuff he already knows thanks to Recovery Girl telling him beforehand, but he nods along anyways, trying to quell the rising anxiety in his stomach. The reality of the situation is starting to sink in, that this test is for real and is right now. The next thing he knows, he's being directed into another room with a single desk. Present, Mick and Midnight only have time to wish him luck before the door closes behind him and he's left alone. Swallowing down his nerves, Izuku turns and looks at the desk. A packet of paper lies on it beside a pencil. He jumps right on it immediately. Like Recovery Girl said, the written exam is large and has a significant amount of advanced medical information that he doesn't know. He's expecting that. He knows he's not expected to know all of it, and that he just needs to answer enough questions correctly to give the board an idea of his level of knowledge. But damn, it really gets his anxiety going each time he comes across a question he doesn't know the answer to. Some of the information is really advanced too. He thought he knew a lot of stuff, but there are words in here that he's never even heard of. It just makes him all the more aware of just how young he is and just how far he still has to go in order to achieve his dream, even though it feels like he's already done so much and worked so hard just to get where he is right now. An hour flies by and before he knows it, his time is up. He struggles to ignore the pitiful wrench his heart gives as he sees his test be taken away from him and instead focuses on his new instructions for the physical portion of the exam. Dr. Edeno comes in and begins leading him down the hallway towards another room. Before entering, he explains that there are a few volunteer patients from the hospital waiting for him inside. Izuku will be expected to heal them and in doing so demonstrate the control he has over his own quirk. The board members will be watching from a separate room through one-way glass, so neither Izuku nor the patients will be able to see them. "Allow me to rejoin the others first before you enter," Dr. Edeno says. "We'll let you know when to go in." Izuku nods. The older man smiles, a twinkle in his eyes. "Good luck." Izuku gives him a wobbly smile in return. "Thank you, sir." Dr. Edeno turns around the corner and disappears. Izuku lets out a shaky breath. He wishes he had at least been able to see his mentor again before the physical portion, just for reassurance, if anything. But he can do this. The worst part is over. He's much more familiar with his quirk, and with all the time and effort he's put in, he's confident in his ability to properly control its output. Soon, Dr. Edeno's voice comes over a speaker in the hallway telling him that he's allowed to enter the room now. Taking a deep breath through his nose, Izuku exhales, then opens the door. There are 3 people in the room, lying on beds. 2 men, one seeming to be in his mid-30s and the other an older gentleman, and a young woman. They all look up when he walks in and Izuku swallows nervously. "Hi," he rasps. The woman gives him an easygoing smile. "Hey, kid. Heard you're here to heal us?" Izuku nods rapidly. Yeah. He notices now that she actually has some nasty-looking scrapes on her leg, and the other 2 must be injured as well of course, but before he starts moving towards them he hesitates, glancing over at the window covering most of the far wall. Sure enough, it's tinted with one-way glass and he can't see through it, but he knows the judges and perhaps even his mentor must be on the other side. After a moment, Dr. Edeno's voice speaks up through the speaker, "You may begin now, Midoriya-kun." Izuku startles. Right. He immediately scurries over to where the young woman is lying. She watches him with a friendly gaze and he ducks his head, looking down at her injuries. The scrapes seem to be limited mostly to just her leg and they don't seem that deep, but there are a lot of them and there's a good amount of bruising too. Izuku also notices that there's some dirt and small gravel still lodged in it too, which means it hasn't been cleaned. Which is odd, because she was taken to a hospital, and one of the first things they should be worried about is infection. Unless Izuku glances around. The room he's in is fairly small, but looking around now, he can see that it's actually a decently stocked medical room. There are cabinets above and below counters along the wall that no doubt contain any basic medical equipment he needs. Which means that this isn't just a test of his quirk, this is a test of his skill as well. Izuku smiles a bit. This is traditional healing. This he can do. It's an easy process, really. One he goes through every day with his patients in Recovery Girl's office. He starts by asking how the woman got her injuries, a rocky beach and some rough waves, and goes through the motions of taking her vitals before putting on some latex gloves and gently cleaning out her wounds. He's done it so many times before that it practically comes naturally to him at this point, and the familiarity of it gives him a slight increase in self-assurance. Then it comes time to use his quirk. Eyeing his 3 patients, Izuku recalls Recovery Girl's plan for the physical portion of the exam. She wanted him to use his quirk to fully heal one person's wound, then for the next stop halfway, then heal the next one slowly, thus fully demonstrating the current range of control he has over his quirk. It seems simple. Too simple. But he won't let himself relax, not until this is all over. He can't let his focus waver for even a second. So, even though he's going to heal her completely, Izuku places his hands on the woman's leg and focuses on the feeling of his energy leaving through his fingertips. It's over quickly since the wound isn't very serious and the woman blinks down at her newly healed leg in awe. "Damn, kid," she says, "that's one impressive quirk." "Thanks," Izuku says, stepping back. Her gaze lingers on his face, and for a moment she gets a certain look in her eyes, like she might want to say something else. For some reason, Izuku finds himself tensing up slightly. But instead, the woman just smiles and thanks him. Izuku nods, moving over towards the older of the 2 men. The man doesn't talk, but gives him a polite nod in greeting when the freckled boy approaches. Izuku can see why he isn't too keen on talking. He has a rather large second-degree burn covering much of his left forearm, which he is cradling close to his chest. While a second-degree burn isn't extremely severe, this one is pretty large and he imagines it's giving the man a fair amount of pain. Izuku asks how he got the burn cooking accident, no surprise there, and takes his vitals anyway. There's no dirt in his wound, but he cleans it out for the sake of being thorough. And now to heal it halfway. A small wave of nerves flutters in his stomach. While he's been practicing this often, Stopping his quirk is something he's only been able to do for the past 5 or 6 weeks, and the past 5 or 6 weeks have been a bit, well, unstable for him. Izuku takes a deep breath. Focus. He conjures up his usual mental image of the hose and places his hands on the man's arm, feeling his quirk activate automatically in response to the wound. Knowing that he doesn't have much time before he heals the minor injury completely, Izuku hastily narrows down the metaphorical hose until he cuts off his energy flow completely. Much like the woman, the old man looks a little surprised at his injury disappearing within seconds and thanks Izuku warmly. Feeling a little thrill of success, the greenette smiles and moves to his last patient. 2 down, 1 to go. Things are going so well, he can't help the hopeful excitement blossoming in his chest. His third patient is a handsome-looking man with a nasty bite on his hand. His girlfriend got a new dog, Izuku finds out. Takes his vitals, cleans the wound, makes sure both he and the dog have had their rabies shots, and then gets on with the healing. For the last one, he believes he's supposed to heal the wound completely, just at a much slower rate than normal, to show that he's not just letting his quirk flow on its own but actually controlling the speed of the output. Taking the man's hand in his, Izuku feels his quirk activate and immediately begins stemming the flow. He narrows down the hose, forcing his energy to slow down to a more reasonable pace as it slips through his fingertips. The puncture wounds begin healing slowly, torn flesh knitting itself back together bit by bit. Izuku hopes the judges can see it clearly from where they are. He narrows down the hose a bit more, trying to get a better grasp on the intangible energy as it flows out of him. It's not often that he heals wounds like this. He doesn't draw out the process any longer than he has to, really. Forcing his quirk to slow down for a while isn't terribly difficult, it just takes a bit of extra concentration since he's having to maintain his control over the speed of the flow rather than snapping it off entirely. Izuku narrows his eyes and focuses on his energy. It's slow now, a smooth, steady speed moving out of him. It always feels like it's just barely controlled, though. Like an untouchable, intangible force that he's still scrambling to be able to control. He can never grasp it, he can never manipulate it, he can never force it to do what he wants, but he did. Izuku blinks. His energy tangible, thick and dense like sludge, moving slower than a snail's pace. He could grasp it, he could direct it wherever he wanted it to go, he could control it. He used it to heal all for one. Izuku's heart leaps to his throat. His control over his quirk slips for a moment. Immediately, he hastily slams down on his energy to stop it and then carefully resumes its slow pace, but the bite is mostly healed at this point. Izuku winces, frustration stinging his eyes. Damn it, damn it. What the hell? Why did he have to think about it now? What is wrong with him? Scarlet eyes burn in his mind and he flinches. You alright, kid? His patient asks. I'm fine, Izuku mumbles, pulling away. Stop it. Now that he's finished healing all 3 patients, he turns and looks at the tinted window for instructions, trying to ignore the rising mix of fear and anxiety in his chest. Thank you, Midoriya-kun, Dr. Edeno's voice says. You may leave through the door you came through. President Mick will take you to a room where you may wait while the board discusses your test results. Stifling a sigh of relief, Izuku bows politely and gives his patients one last smile before turning and walking over to the door. President Mick is waiting for him just outside and grins brightly when he sees him. Hey, little listener. His loud voice echoes in the hallway as he finger snaps at Izuku. How do you do? The freckled boy slumps against the wall and covers his face with a groan. Not good. President Mick's jaw drops comically. Not good? He squawks, hopping over to Izuku's side. What do you mean not good? You're the best healer in town aside from Recovery Girl, of course. I'm sure you did great. Izuku slides his hands down his face and glances at the floor. I got distracted, he mumbles, shame burning at his chest. Tears push at the edges of his eyes and he grits his teeth. Why do the villains have to keep ruining everything? It was so stupid, he hisses. President Mick frowns. Hey now, don't get too frustrated. His expression eases into a smile. Look on the bright side, it's all over now. No more super hard tests, no more studying, you're all done. Now let's not keep the ladies waiting any longer, shall we? He gestures down the hallway and Izuku gives him a confused look. I don't know where I'm going, he says. President Mick blinks, then immediately straightens up. Right. He shouts, follow me. He starts marching down the hallway and Izuku follows him with a small sigh. They meet up with Recovery Girl in midnight in a waiting room of sorts. Izuku's mentor takes one look at his face and walks right over to him, reaching up to take his face in her hands. You did well, she says firmly, holding his gaze, and I am very proud of you. No matter what the outcome of this test is, I want you to know that. Alright? Throat suddenly feeling tight, Izuku swallows and nods. Recovery Girl smiles softly. Alright. It's over now. Don't worry about what you could have or should have done. All we do now is wait. Izuku nods again. And then they wait. Minutes tick by slowly, each one feeling like hours, as they pass. Izuku's leg bounces up and down relentlessly, his mind whirling with anxiety. Now that he's had some time to calm down, he tries his best not to beat himself up too much over what happened during the test, considering everything that's happened, and the fact that he hasn't gone to therapy yet. It still sucks, and he's still angry about it, but he just doesn't really want to make himself feel even worse by being angry at himself for it. Being angry at all for one sounds a lot better. The teachers try to fill the heavy silence with some small talk that Izuku pays little attention to, but their voices fade into the background noise of his swirling thoughts. They're provided with lunch and Recovery Girl gently encourages him to eat since he used his quirk, but with his current anxieties he's decidedly not hungry and thankfully she doesn't push it. He isn't sure how long they wait for, but finally the door opens. Dr. Edeno leads the way as the rest of the board members enter the room. His lip quirks as Izuku jumps to his feet and gazes at them with eager eyes. Recovery Girl and the other two heroes stand up as well, flanking the young apprentice. For a few moments, there's a long, tense silence between the two groups as they stare at each other. Then, Dr. Edeno smiles and says, "Congratulations, Midoriya Izuku. The board has granted you your provisional healer's license." Izuku instantly bursts into tears. Yeah. President Mick whoops, practically glomping Izuku. The greenhead throws all cares into the wind and buries his face into his chest, sobbing uncontrollably. President Mick laughs and swings him around. Ha ha. You did it. You did it. What did I tell you, kiddo? He puts him down and ruffles his curls into an absolute mess. Izuku lets out a watery squawk, tears rolling down his cheeks. Oh my god, he croaks, oh my god, He turns to Recovery Girl, wide-eyed. She's watching him with unmistakable pride shining in her eyes, and he lets out a choked noise, diving forward to crush her in a hug. She squeaks, but wraps her arms around him just as tightly. Congratulations, Midoriya-kun, she whispers in his ear, you've earned this. A hard ball forms in his throat, and he buries his face in her hair. When they finally pull away, Midnight congratulates him as well, and then Dr. Edeno gets their attention once again. I must clarify, he says with a tone of professionalism, although he watches them with a warm gaze, that this is a provisional license, and a healer's one at that, not a medical one, meaning that you may not assist or perform any surgical procedures on your own. Izuku is already shaking his head rapidly and Dr. Edeno smiles, but we were very impressed by your current level of knowledge and we are looking forward to seeing you grow. Izuku tries not to sound too breathless as he says emphatically, thank you. Dr. Edeno chuckles, you're welcome. Recovery Girl then goes up with Izuku to shake hands with the rest of the board members once again and bid their goodbyes. They seem a bit more friendly now, giving Izuku small words of advice or simply telling him to reach out if he ever needs help in the future. It's so exciting, feeling like he's starting to make his own connections in the healing world just like Recovery Girl. He just wishes his face wasn't covered in tears and snot for it. He frantically rubs his face on his sleeve, trying to wipe it all away, but it's all for naught when Dr. Edeno hands him his provisional license a couple of minutes later. Like a real, physical license on a plastic card, with lamination and everything. Izuku bursts into tears all over again, sputtering out an apology through his blubbering. Dr. Edeno just laughs and waves him off. "It's alright," he says, "I was even more of a mess when I first got my license." Izuku hiccups and nods because what else does he do? All he can process is the fact that he got his provisional license and he's clutching it to his chest like it's made of pure gold. Finally, Recovery Girl takes pity on him and starts wrapping things up, thanking Dr. Edeno and the other board members one last time before ushering him towards the door. Izuku sniffles and wipes away his tears, managing to call out one last garbled thank you before the door closes behind them. Let me see. Midnight gestures to his license and he holds it up for her to see. Both she and present Mick peer at it. Izuku lets out a wet giggle. Then, realization hits him. "I've gotta show Mom." He gasps, reaching into his pocket to pull out his phone, and All Might. "And Aizawa-sensei. And my friends. Do you think they're back yet?" "Oh, probably not yet, they've still got some time, Midoriya-kun, let's get back to the car first," Recovery Girl says amusedly. "Right, sorry." Izuku flushes, then excitement hits him all over again. "Oh my god, Recovery Girl, I did it. I got my license. Thank you so much, I couldn't have done it without you." "Well, obviously," Recovery Girl says in a dry tone and Izuku snorts. She smiles. "But I couldn't have asked for a better apprentice." Izuku's heart warms. "Now let's focus on turning you into a full-fledged healer." Izuku smiles and nods resolutely. He practically glows with happiness the entire ride back to school. His mother calls him when she gets his text and tearfully tells him how proud of him she is. That nearly makes him start crying again, but he just barely manages to hold out and instead eagerly tells her about his test. Even though his classmates are still probably busy taking their own exams, he texts the group chat anyways, letting them know that he passed and that he's on his way back so that they can see it once they're done. Then, he takes a picture of his provisional license and sends it to All Might. Midoriya at 2:45 p.m. Get ready to have two lungs again. The message is read, but for some reason All Might doesn't respond. A little odd. But maybe he's just busy. Izuku doesn't pay much mind to it and chats excitedly with present Mick and Midnight throughout the rest of the car ride. When they reach the school, even though he knows he probably won't be able to leave again for a while, it doesn't feel so bad coming back. It doesn't quite feel like coming home yet, but there is a sense of comfort that comes with returning to the familiarity of his walls. Izuku isn't sure what has changed, but he definitely prefers comfort over feeling trapped any day. As they get out of the car, Izuku's phone buzzes in his pocket. He takes it out. "Todoroki 3:08 p.m. Where are you?" Izuku frowns. He'd texted the group chat that he was on his way back to school. "Midoriya 3:08 p.m. I'm at school." "Why?" 2 seconds later, Todoroki calls him. Bewildered, Izuku answers and holds his phone up to his ear, asking, "Todoroki-kun?" What's wrong? On the other side of the phone, he hears the familiar sound of ice crackling and a girl shrieking. A jolt of fear shoots through Izuku's heart. "Todoroki-kun!" he exclaims. The adult's heads snap over at the alarm in his voice. What's wrong? What's happening? Shadow wasn't going to let himself get distracted by Midoriya today. That was the plan. He still has a goal to become the #1 hero, after all. And it should have been easy. Midoriya was going to go off to do his provisional license exam, Todoroki was going to go do his own. They weren't even supposed to be in the same vicinity as each other. But then, as Class 1A was filing onto the bus just outside of I's gate, Midoriya showed up out of the blue, panting and sweating. When Aizawa asked what he was doing here, he said that there was some big emergency at the hospital he was supposed to do his license exam at, and the board members had to push it to the next day, meaning he was able to go with them. Everyone was glad, of course, including Shadow, who resigned himself to the fact that, no, he will not be remaining focused during the ride to the exam area, not while Midoriya Izuku's freckles exist, but that's alright, because he won't be there to distract him during the exam, and that's all that really matters anyways. So now he figures, what's the harm in sitting next to him during the bus ride? Deku doesn't do much other than roll his eyes at him in response when he walks over and sits himself down, next to the greenette, but for some reason Midoriya doesn't really have much of a reaction. Not to say that he doesn't react at all, but after their, well, make-out session yesterday, he would have thought there would have been some cute blushing and maybe some stammering, considering how easily flustered Midoriya gets. But all he does is give him a glancing smile and continue chatting away with Kaminari and Ashido across the aisle seat. Shadow blinks and makes eye contact with Deku, who arches a brow at Midoriya. Alright, at least he's not the only one who finds the behavior odd. After a moment, Deku huffs and turns his attention back to Kirishima, leaving Shadow to figure this out on his own. Since his last direct approach seemed to go rather well, he decides to try another direct approach and places his hand over Midoriya's. Bad idea. It's as if a switch is flipped. Midoriya's head whips towards Shadow and there's a brief flash of something in his eyes, something that Shadow's never seen in his eyes before and he doesn't understand, and then his personality does a complete 180. For the next hour, he practically lathers Shadow in his attention, giggling at everything he says, cuddling up to his side, and not letting go of his hand for a single second. It's a bit overwhelming, to be honest, and kind of weird. Midoriya doesn't do anything particularly outrageous, aside from being a bit more physically affectionate than usual, but something about his behavior seems really strange and out of character. Shadow doesn't really know how to feel about it, but a sense of unease tugs at his chest. The feeling only grows when they reach the license exam location and come across the Shiketsu students. One of them he seems familiar, but Shadow can't quite put a name to his face. Recognizes Midoriya and approaches him in a friendly manner. Shadow doesn't miss the brief flash of confusion that passes over Midoriya's face before he perks up and acts as if they've known each other for years. If the Shiketsu student is taken aback by his overly friendly behavior, he doesn't show it, but Shadow and Deku share a glance. A silent communication passes between them. Something's going on here. But whatever it is, it'll have to wait until after they're done with the test. A couple of long, frustrating, exhausting, and ultimately disappointing hours later, he finally sees Midoriya again. While they hadn't planned on him being there, the staff was more than happy to let him help out with all the injured students in the infirmary. Aizawa had just gone to retrieve him while they were waiting for everyone's provisional licenses to be printed and handed out. Everyone's except his. Well, and Deku's. And Yoroshi's. Midoriya is chatting incessantly with, or rather, at, a rather annoyed-looking Aizawa, but perks up when he spots Shadow. Todoroki-kun. He hops over to him and cocks his head to the side. Uh-oh, you look grumpy. What's with the frowny face? Frowny face. Jiro echoes with a dubious voice, like she can't quite tell if he's joking or not. Midoriya glances at her, but before he can say anything, Deku's snarling voice suddenly shouts, "Oi! Stop fucking talking weird, you little shit." Midoriya turns to look at Deku, an expression of hurt on his face. "Deku-kun, that's mean!" he exclaims, eyes watering. "What are you talking about anyway?" Everyone within the immediate vicinity stares at Midoriya. His eyes widen a little and he shrinks in on himself slightly. "What?" Deku's expression is incredulous. "The fuck did you just Call me? Midoriya blinks, confused. Bakugo-kun? He repeats, as if he doesn't even understand what's wrong with the statement, but he looks a bit more uncertain now. Bakugo and Shadow make eye contact again. This isn't their Midoriya. It can't be. The small group around him is staring at the freckled boy like they don't even recognize him, and he's just staring back at them in confusion as if he doesn't understand why. But Shadow's eyes latch onto a bead of sweat trickling down the back of his neck. Adrenaline kicks in. His eyes dart around. Aizawa is standing a few meters away, not too far to intervene if needed, but he's not paying attention, speaking to Miss Joke with his back turned to the students. Shadow then finds himself taking his phone out of his pocket. In the back of his mind it makes sense to call someone he doesn't know, but at that moment he sees a text from Midoriya telling everyone that he passed his provisional license exam and that he's on his way back to His heart stops. Bakugo and some of the others start talking to maybe not Midoriya, but Shadow stays quiet as he rapidly types out a text instead. Todoroki 3:08 p.m. Where are you? Midoriya 3:08 p.m. I'm at school. Why? Shadow hits the call button and puts it on speaker. Todoroki-kun? What's wrong? As soon as he hears the real Midoriya's voice, he immediately stomps his foot on the ground and encases the imposter in a glacier of ice. Over the phone, Izuku hears muffled yells and shouts. His heart pounds in his throat. Todoroki-kun! He exclaims, his weak voice breaking. What is going on? Who is yelling? Kid, President Mick asks, approaching him along with Midnight and Recovery Girl. They share confused glances. What is? Izuku shakes his head. I don't know. He puts his phone on speaker so they can hear the chaos on the other line. After a particular shout, President Mick's brow furrows. Shouty-kun? There's a few more moments of unintelligible shouting, then Todoroki suddenly hisses. Somebody shape-shifted into you. Terror stabs his heart. What? Who? Midnight demands. I don't know. Some more muffled chaos, then Todoroki growls. She looks like that League of Villains bitch we saw in the forest. Izuku's stomach drops. No. A memory resurfaces. It's difficult, you see, it's part of my quirk. I can turn into people if I drink their blood. 2. Togohimiko. He whispers breathlessly. The teachers glance at him. But how? His mind spins, frantically trying to think when she could have gotten his blood, but God, there were so many opportunities, really. She could have done it when he was unconscious during the first night, or she could have taken it afterwards from the knives she used to stab him with. He doesn't know how much blood she needs. He doesn't know how long she's been him for. He doesn't know how she did it. He doesn't know. Panic rises in his throat. God, what else could she have done? Is it just her? Is he about to get caught up in another villain fight again? He can't not again. Aizawa-sensei's got her now, though. Todoroki's voice interrupts his thoughts, forcing them to a halt. I froze her as soon as I heard your voice, and he erased her quirk. He and a couple other pros are restraining her, and somebody's calling the police. Recovery Girl lets out a sigh of relief. That's good. She reaches out to grip Izuku's forearm. He lets it ground him, taking a deep breath through his nose, trying to steady his rabbiting heartbeat and remind himself that he's safe. He's surrounded by heroes. Togohimiko can't hurt him, no villain can. Who did you say she was? President Mick looks at him. You said her name. Izuku swallows and puts his hand over the one his mentor has on his arm. Togohimiko, he rasps, she was one of the villains that kidnapped me. Her quirk allows her to shapeshift into any person she consumes the blood of. President Mick's expression tightens and Todoroki suddenly inhales sharply. Midoriya-kun, she spent all day in the infirmary treating injured students. Izuku's breath hitches. Why would? He cuts himself off before he can finish asking the question, a realization hitting him. It seems to hit President Mick and the other two teachers at the same time too, because President Mick then asks, Todoroki-kun? Hand the phone to Aizawa-sensei. Woldia. Todoroki is quick to obey. After relaying what Izuku told him about Toga's quirk, Present Mix says, "Bet you anything that she's hiding a crap ton of blood vials on her." Aizawa seems to come to the same conclusion as well. The phone gets passed back to Todoroki, and Izuku can't really hear very well what goes on for the next couple of minutes aside from a lot of muffled, growling and shouting and a distinctly shrill, feminine voice that sends shivers up Izuku's spine, but then Todoroki's voice fills the speaker once more. "She was hiding a lot of blood on her," he says in a dark tone, "a lot." The confirmation makes Izuku's stomach flip. He hears a faint siren in the background. "Oh, the police are here," Todoroki says. "That's a relief. Who knows how much blood she could have gotten away with while she was disguised as you. Nobody would have thought twice about a healer drawing some blood." Izuku is starting to feel a bit dizzy. Recovery Girl notices and says, "Well, it's alright, it's over now. She's being handed over to the police, right?" "Yeah." Present Mix phone starts buzzing. "Oh, and that's Shoto-kun, I'd better take this," he says, already, putting the phone to his ear. "Let's get Midoriya-kun back to the dorms, by the way." "Hey, Sho." He turns away and Midnight puts a hand on Izuku's back, gently pushing him after Present Mix. Recovery Girl takes his hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. He lets out a slow sigh of relief. Togohimiko shape-shifted into him. The thought is terrifying, but she got captured. The League of Villains was thwarted by the heroes yet again, and she won't be able to hurt anyone for the rest of her life. Bitter satisfaction curls around his heart, still rapidly fluttering inside the cage of his chest. "Midoriya-kun?" Todoroki's voice comes through his phone. "You still there?" "Yeah." Izuku snaps out of his thoughts. "Bukage-kun is here." Zuku. Kaken's shout drowns out Todoroki's voice before he even finishes. "You alright?" "Yeah, I'm fine," Izuku reassures him. "I'm at a..." Then, unsure if it's appropriate considering the situation, he hesitantly perks up and adds, "I passed my license exam." "Hey, man, that's great!" Kirishima's voice exclaims. Izuku blinks in surprise. "Everyone else is here too," Todoroki mentions. "You're on speaker." "Well done, Midoriya-kun." Ida congratulates. "It's a little weird cause we thought you were here with us the whole time," Kaminari says, "but yeah, good job man." The rest of his classmates give their congratulations and Izuku smiles, chest lightening. "Thanks guys. How did you guys do?" He's absolutely not prepared to hear that everyone except Bukage and Todoroki passed. "Wait, what?" he asks, pure confusion coloring his voice. "What happened?" Unintelligible grumbling is all he gets from Kaken. Todoroki is quiet for a few moments, then he says, "I'll explain later." He doesn't say anything else, and none of his other classmates offer any other explanation, so all Izuku can do is accept it for now. Okay. He's still confused. They're the two strongest students in the class. How on earth did they fail? But surely they must have a good reason, so he can wait for that. He just hopes they didn't get into any trouble and got themselves disqualified or anything. After wishing his classmates a safe trip back and bidding them goodbye, he's about to put his phone back in his pocket when he notices an unread message. It's from All Might. "Toshinori 3:30 p.m. Congratulations, my boy." Izuku blinks. Finally, he responded. "What took him so long?" "Midoriya-kun," Midnight calls. "Come on, don't fall behind." Izuku startles, not having realized that he slowed down, and rushes to catch up with the adults. "Sorry." He apologizes. Present Mix is walking a bit ahead, still talking with Aizawa about the situation, but Izuku tunes him out and glances at Midnight. "Do you know if All Might is busy today?" he asks. "Yeah, I think he had some business off campus in the morning," she replies. "He might be back now, though." "Why?" Izuku looks down at his phone. "Midoriya 3:31 p.m. Are you in a..." "Toshinori 3:31 p.m. Yes." His heart gives a leap of excitement. "Midoriya 3:31 p.m. Meet me in the dorms." present Mick and Midnight escort them to the steps of Heights Alliance, but leave them there. Recovery Girl almost leaves too, but he manages to sputter out some half-baked excuse for her to come inside involving making her a cup of tea that somehow works. When she walks in to see All Might sitting on one of the couches in the common room, her expression morphs into displeasure. "I should have known," she sniffs, "you've never offered to make me a cup of tea before. I thought you wanted to show gratitude to your dear old mentor." All Might looks confused. "I do." Izuku jumps in front of her. "And I will." Recovery Girl remains unimpressed. Izuku clasps his hands and gives her a pleading look, batting his eyelashes. "Pretty please?" Her lip twitches. What is happening?" All Might asks uncertainly. Izuku spins around and whips out his provisional license, showing it off with a bright grin. "I got my license, All Might." "Yes, I saw. That's very good," but All Might blinks, then his eyes widen. "Oh, you mean now?" "Yes, now," Izuku says eagerly. "Oh, my boy, no, you've had a very long day." All Might is already trying to wave him off, but Izuku shakes his head. "Come on, I'll be fine, I barely used my quirk at all today," he reassures, glancing pointedly at Recovery Girl. She huffs, but doesn't dispute it. "Still, I don't want you to feel like you have to rush," All Might says. "Oh, there's no point in telling him that," Recovery Girl scoffs, rolling her eyes. "This boy's been rushing to heal you ever since I met him." Izuku looks at her hopefully and she sighs. "Oh, go ahead. Just not all at once, remember. Don't you dare drain yourself, young man. It's going to take a few sessions before he's completely healed." Izuku gives a squeal and rushes over to All Might's side. The man tries to look exasperated, but it's ruined by the excited shine in his eyes and the smile on his face. "I don't suppose I could at least ask how your day was first?" he asks amusedly. Izuku plops down on the couch next to him. "Great," he says immediately, then pauses. "Well, a villain did just shapeshift into me." All Might's eyes widen, but she got captured, so I'd say it's still pretty great. All Might stares at him, jaw slackening slightly. I'm sorry, what was that, my boy?" "It's alright now, though, so let's get to it," Izuku says excitedly, completely dismissing All Might's shock as he eyes the man's upper body eagerly. Despite his excitement, Izuku forces himself to calm down slightly and carefully lifts up his shirt, revealing his scarred, mangled torso beneath. It's been a long while since he's last seen it and it still makes him flinch a little. He can't believe All Might has been living with a wound this terrible for so long. Guilt claws at his heart once more, but he pushes it away. No more. All Might won't be in pain any longer. Izuku is going to make sure of that. He starts to reach forward with his hand, then hesitates ever so slightly. But he needs to be careful. You only have a limited amount of energy you can give at a time. It makes sense, I suppose. Our bodies are vastly different, and yours does need a certain amount of energy to perform basic functions. Izuku grits his teeth as All For One's words echo in his ears. As much as he loathes the idea of even the faintest comparison between him and All Might, it is logical, in this case, to heed the similarities. They're both large men with devastating injuries that require multiple healing sessions. Izuku would be foolish to not let his past experience help guide him, despite how much he might hate his past patient. Taking a deep breath, he forces his excitement down to a simmer and places his hand on All Might's torso, immediately clamping down on the hose as soon as his energy starts to leak out. He wants to feel out All Might's injuries first. The most obvious one is the missing lung, of course, the gaping chasm in his life force where there's no energy at all, but there's some pretty heavy damage along his left torso as well, where his scar is. There's also various smaller injuries littering the rest of his bodies, older wounds, nothing as serious as missing organs, but it still makes Izuku's breath catch in his throat at just how many there are. Thick scar tissue deep lying within his muscles, the shadows of fractures long since healed that still remain on his bones. Izuku's eyes prick. He didn't realize how much pain All Might has been hiding. All Might, he whispers, there's. His throat closes off and he swallows thickly. All Might always seemed so indestructible. Even after Izuku found out about his injury, he always seemed like nothing could ever hurt him, really. He's the symbol of peace, the #1 hero. But Izuku supposes that this is the price that comes with being #1. To get a new scar after every fight, until you're littered with old wounds like this, even if they're not all visible to the eye, it doesn't seem like something to be glorified, actually. If anything, it seems really sad. Izuku presses his lips together. All Might's energy flows warm and vibrant within him, swirling around his old injuries, making the empty pocket of his missing lung all the more noticeable. Once Izuku activates his quirk again, the majority of his energy is going to flow there. But not all. Not all, Izuku frowns in thought. After the first time he healed All Might, the man had mentioned that his scar had decreased slightly in size. Which means he did a little more than just regrow his stomach. His quirk. It reacts to serious immediate injuries first, actual, bleeding wounds, which is how he was able to heal Todoroki's injuries and have him pull away before he could heal his scar, and even heal All Might when he got injured during USJ. But these aren't immediate injuries, these are old wounds, and even though his quirk might react to the most serious one first, it will still go throughout the entire body. Izuku can't direct his quirk to heal a specific wound first, so if he's going to heal All Might now, Izuku bites his lip. He doesn't usually deal with patients with so many injuries. Usually it's easy for his quirk to just be able to focus on 1 or 2 wounds. Maybe he can just let his energy flow to everything and heal them all bit by bit. Like Recovery Girl said, it will take a few sessions. But damn it, but then there's All Might's missing lung. Izuku doesn't think regrowing an entire lung is something he should stop in the middle of. That's something he's going to have to do in one sitting, but how is he going to be able to do that with all these other injuries in the way? Regrowing it is going to take all the energy he has to give, and if he's going to be simultaneously healing other wounds, then he'll definitely exhaust himself for sure. Izuku grits his teeth in frustration. Shit. What does he do? He needs to heal the smaller injuries first, but to do that he needs to direct his energy and he can't. He doesn't know how, but he did. Izuku blinks. He did do it once. He did it when he healed All for One. Izuku swallows. No, he can't do that again. Even if he could, Recovery Girl would never allow him to force his quirk like that again. All Might would never allow him to. Besides, he would have to injure himself. But maybe if he could just try and focus on how it felt. He needs to be able to do this somehow. He can't think of any other way to be able to heal All Might. And he hates comparing the two together, but he was able to regrow All for One's eyes separately, without having his energy go to any of his other injuries. That is exactly what he needs to replicate right now. Izuku hesitates. He doesn't like thinking about when he forced his quirk. He tries to avoid any thoughts of All for One at all costs. Scarlet eyes flash in his mind and he grimaces, giving himself a mental shake. Come on, he can do this. Go back, before that. It had felt strange, he remembers. It was hard to get going at first, and it was kind of like a sort of pressure? Building in his chest, before it burst out really quickly and then slowed down all of the sudden. What really stuck out, though, was that it was sludge-like, almost tangible, a complete contrast to the smooth, watery flow of his usual energy. That's what made it so easy to grasp then, to direct and control, but it was also incredibly draining just to keep pushing it out of him. Izuku considers this. Obviously, he's not going to force his quirk again, that's a given. But the act of pushing the energy where it needs to be, that's something that he's done before, technically. He just needs to either remember how, replicate that, and then adjust it to how his energy normally feels. But that's the thing, He's tried pushing and grabbing at his energy before, and it just doesn't work. It's intangible, that's why when he was forcing his quirk it was suddenly so easy to manipulate. Izuku bites his lip, frowning in concentration. If he can't push and he can't grab, then how is he going to control his energy? How can he control something he can't touch? It has to be possible. Nejire does it, doesn't she? She gave him that hose analogy that's already helped so much. Come on, he can't give up. Think, what does his energy feel like? Intangible, he can't touch it, it's a flow, slips right through his grasp like water. That's pretty accurate, and it goes with his hose analogy too. He can't touch it, can't grab it, can't push it where it needs it to go, but he can guide it, maybe? Izuku blinks, realization dawning on him. Holy shit. All this time he's been trying to grab his energy when he should have been trying to guide it. It's so obvious. Wait, but can he even do that? It's one thing to fit it with his hose analogy, but it's another thing to actually make his quirk do it. But if he's able to slow down his quirk by narrowing the flow, then adjusting the course couldn't be that far-fetched, right? He needs to talk to Nejire. Midoriya-kun? All Might asks, gazing down at him with a hint of concern. You alright? Izuku startles, realizing that he's been silently staring at All Might's torso in intense concentration for a long while. Oh. Right, yes, yeah, I'm great. But I can't heal you. All Might blinks in confusion. Huh? I need to talk to Nejire-senpai. Izuku pulls down his shirt neatly. All Might looks even more confused. Who? Midoriya-kun? Recovery Girl questions. Izuku quickly explains his discovery of All Might's numerous injuries, which they apparently knew about and just hadn't thought to mention to him, and his realization of the problem that would occur with healing him and the possible solution. Recovery Girl's expression takes on a thoughtful air as he explains this and then turns to All Might, wincing apologetically. I'm so sorry, All Might, I know this means you'll have to wait a bit longer to be healed, but I swear I'll get this down as quickly as I can. He promises. I don't think it will even take too long, really. Now that I'm talking about it out loud it seems simple enough, and I'm sure Nejire-senpai will have loads of good ideas. My boy, you don't have to worry, All Might reassures him, ruffling his hair. Geez, kid, you really don't know how to relax, do you? Izuku flushes. Take as much time as you need to figure this out. I can wait a bit longer. Izuku lets out a small sigh of relief and gives him a grateful smile. Thank you. I'll get on it right away. Do you know where Nejire-senpai is? He looks at Recovery Girl. His mentor rolls her eyes. You never rest, do you? Do you? He asks cheekily. She wrinkles her nose and glares lightly for a moment before conceding. She and the other third years should probably be finishing up their training soon. Go harass her if you must. She waves her hand dismissively. Izuku is already getting up off the couch, grinning. What, you're not going to stop me? Recovery Girl shrugs. It's a good idea, and I know there's no point in telling you to take it easy even after the very long day you've had. Besides, I'm just glad you didn't just go ahead and try it on Toshinori-kun before anyone else. Izuku rolls his eyes and walks backwards towards the door, putting his hand to his chest in mock hurt. Oh, come on, Recovery Girl, I'm not that reckless. Snorting, Izuku turns back around and opens the door. Before he steps out, a thought crosses his mind and he glances over his shoulder. Hey, by the way, All Might? The man looks up. Where were you today? He asks. Midnight said you went somewhere in the morning. For some reason, All Might seems to stiffen slightly. Something flashes across his eyes, but the troubled look passes as quickly as it comes. He plasters on a fake smile. Oh, I just had to meet up with an old acquaintance of mine, he says casually, and offers up nothing else. Izuku blinks. Okay. I alright, bye, then. He quickly shuts the door behind him. That was weird. And clearly a lie. He wonders where All Might really went this morning. Why would he lie to him about it? Or maybe he's just not allowed to talk about it after all. Izuku is just a student, and All Might is an adult, a hero. There are probably a lot of things he just can't tell him, even if he's a healer in training. When Midnight said All Might had business off campus, she made it sound like it was important. Izuku sniffs. Well, as curious as he is, he thinks he can keep his nose out of this one until All Might is ready, or able, to tell him about it. He's got other things to focus on right now. It takes a little while to find out where the third years are training, and when he does find them, they're mostly wrapping up since it's getting late in the afternoon at this point. His senpais, despite being sweaty and tired, perk up when they see him shyly peek into the gym. Narrator shoots the two boys a devilish look over her shoulder and practically launches herself at him in glee when he announces that he came here for her help. After getting past her usual squealing and gushing, once he tells her what his problem is, she is, as he expected, more than willing to help. They find a quiet corner where he goes into more detail about what he needs to do and how he doesn't know how to guide his energy yet. Narrator listens with a surprisingly serious and thoughtful expression, then immediately starts making suggestions, comparing his quirk to her own and even bringing up the hose analogy when he mentions that it's useful to help explain how she controls her energy spirals. Izuku listens with rapt attention, hope blossoming in his chest with each piece of advice that she gives, mind already swirling with ideas of how he can apply it to his own quirk. They're so similar, their quirks, but also so different, it's crazy. Izuku is so grateful he has someone he can look up to for guidance for stuff like this. It's nice to know that he doesn't have to figure this out entirely by himself. "Thank you, Narrator-senpai," he says, clutching her hands. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." She laughs, flushing. "No problem. What kind of senpai would I be if I couldn't teach my kuhai how to control his quirk?" She winks. "Just be sure to mention to the boys that I'm your favorite." Izuku giggles and shakes his head exasperatedly. One of her friends then calls her and he turns away, tossing a goodbye over his shoulder which she returns. They part ways and he begins jogging back to the dorms with a smile on his face. There's still some time before his classmates will be back since their exam location was a bit of a drive, so Izuku decides to finally unwind and takes a shower. Now that he's not jumping from one crisis to another, he discovers that he's actually quite tired. Even though he didn't use his quirk much, it was a very mentally and emotionally exhausting day. When his classmates do finally return, they find him curled up on the couch with sushi draped over his lap, yawning sleepily. "He," he greets with a lazy wave. "He," they chorus back in unison, trudging entirely, shoulders sagging. "God, I am beat," Kaminari groans, walking over to flop down face first on the couch next to him. "Do we really have to start regular classes tomorrow?" His voice is muffled by the cushion. "Unfortunately, yes," Izuku says. Kaminari groans again. Giggling, Izuku reaches over to scratch his head gently, then grimaces when his fingers pull away all sweaty. "You're covered in sweat. Go take a shower." Kaminari grumbles, but obediently pulls his face out of the cushion and gets up, lumbering away. His other classmates fancy the same idea and make their way to their own dorms, greeting Izuku as they pass by and congratulating him on his success. Well, most of them do. Kaken walks straight from the door to the elevator, shoulders hunched, not sparing him or anyone a single glance as he glares straightforwardly. He disappears in a matter of seconds. Izuku blinks and glances at Todoroki, meeting his gaze. His carefully blank expression betrays no emotion, but that alone is enough to tell Izuku just how upset he is. Right. They both failed. Izuku sighs. Looks like his day isn't over yet. Todoroki, at least, seems to be the most stable at the moment, so Izuku decides to go after Kaken first. He's just stood up from the couch when Midoriya Aizawa walks in, phone in hand lowering from his ear. His eyes roam over Izuku briefly, then flicker over to the TV, which is playing some old medical show that he randomly switched on to pass the time. It's currently a rather gruesome scene, but for some reason Aizawa seems to relax, slightly. He looks back at Izuku. The League of Villains attacked the police transport carrying Toga Himiko, he says gravely, and Izuku's heart stops. She got away. Everyone whirls around to look at him in alarm. What? What the hell? How did that happen? They were ambushed on the freeway, Aizawa explains. You'll probably hear more about it on the news, but I wanted you to find out from me first. Izuku stares at him, eyes wide, feeling as if the rug has been pulled out from under him for the millionth time that day. What do we do now? Ashido asks, glancing nervously between him and Izuku. Nothing, Aizawa replies. What? Everyone cries again. But she has his blood. Your Araka protests. She had his blood, Aizawa says pointedly, she used it up. But she might have more, Todoroki argues. We don't know that, Aizawa says in a calm but firm voice, and even if she did, she'd be stupid to try and pull a stunt like that again. She showed her hand, and now we know what measures we need to take in order to avoid falling for her tricks again. No dramatic changes need to be made. We will continue to protect Midoriya to the best of our ability, and if any of you ever become suspicious of one another, then simply ask something that only that person would know. But I don't want you guys becoming paranoid over this, understood? The students share a few glances, then murmurs of agreement ripple amongst them. They relax slightly after Aizawa's explanation, and Izuku finds himself doing so too. He's still a bit unnerved by the thought of Toga being out there. But when it comes down to it, he really just ended up right back where he was at the beginning of the day. Aizawa's right, nothing has to change. For now, anyway. Izuku lets out a soft sigh of relief. His classmates begin to disperse, most going off to take showers and unwind after their long day. Aizawa casts Izuku another brief assessing look, as if he's making sure he's really alright, then gives a decisive nod and turns to leave. A hand brushes Izuku's elbow and he glances to his left to see Todoroki gazing at him with a flicker of concern in his eyes. The question "Are you okay?" goes unspoken. Heartwarming, Izuku smiles and nods. Then, he shoots back with a quirked brow, "Are you?" Todoroki sighs through his nose. Izuku is fully prepared to have to pry his answers out of him, but he ends up not having to do much more work, though, because Todoroki tells him everything during dinner without needing much prompting. They find a nice secluded spot on the couches away from their classmates, and Izuku listens to Todoroki as he tells him about Yoroshi and his frustration at being compared to Endeavor, about his realization that he still hasn't moved on from his past hatred, despite having reunited with his mother, about losing his temper at Yoroshi and just barely winning against Gang Orca, about still failing to get his provisional license. Izuku listens and he doesn't quite know what to say. But that's alright, because Todoroki doesn't really seem to be looking for any help. He seems like he already knows what he needs to do. Izuku gazes at him, imploringly, and tilts his head. Todoroki presses his lips together and sighs, "I can't just bury and forget about my past. I wanted to. I thought it would have been easy to just put my father behind me and move on now that I've reunited with my mother, but I can't. It's not that simple." He glances off to the side, a shadow passing over his eyes. Izuku reaches over to squeeze his hand. "I'm sorry," he murmurs. "Don't be." Todoroki shakes his head. "I'll be fine. This doesn't change much, anyway. I'm still going to surpass that old fool and become number one." Izuku smiles. He doesn't doubt it unless Kaken beats him to it, of course. Imagining anyone other than All Might as the number one hero seems strange, but a thought suddenly strikes him, making his blood go cold. The price that comes with being number one. Todoroki, scars littering his body, getting a new one with each battle, getting injured with each fight, and the people will cheer him on and glorify his victories, but as he gets older he'll still be in pain. Pain from battles he fought long ago and old wounds not visible to the eye, but he still feels because he's not indestructible, he's fragile, he's human. Midoriya-kun? Todoroki asks, peering at him, are you alright? Izuku swallows past the hard knot in his throat and nods. He puts his empty plate on the coffee table and then leans against Todoroki, resting his head on the other boy's chest. Todoroki is briefly surprised, but relaxes beneath him after a moment, hesitantly putting his chin on top of his curls. Izuku breathes in his scent and smiles softly. No, he won't allow that to happen. All Might will be the last #1 hero to live in pain. Todoroki's arm settles comfortably around his waist. Izuku sighs and snuggles a bit closer. What a long day, he exhales. Todoroki hums in agreement. Congratulations on getting your license, by the way, he murmurs, sorry I didn't say it earlier. Izuku smiles against his chest. Thank you. And it's okay. They don't say anything for a couple of minutes, simply enjoying each other's presence after a long day apart. Kaminari glances at them as he walks past and drawls teasingly, "Ga-a." Izuku wrinkles his nose and glares at his back. In the corner of his eye, he can see Ashido grinning and giving him a thumbs up from the dinner table. His cheeks heat up. Maybe this is a bit too much of a public spot to cuddle, but when he starts to shift away, Todoroki's arm tightens around him like a rabbit's snare. He lets out an amused huff. Something that he's been idly wondering ever since the call then crosses his mind once again, and he asks, by the way, Todoroki-kun? The bicolored boy hums. How did you know Toga was me? She must have looked exactly like me, if her quirk lets her shape shift. Todoroki looks at him with warm eyes, the corner of his mouth pulling up into a soft smile. She could have been the best actress in the world, but nothing could ever change the fact that there's only one Midoriya Izuku. Izuku's heart flutters. Oh, he stutters, averting his gaze shyly as he smiles to himself. Todoroki's eyes linger indulgently on his blushing face for a moment, before he adds, also. She called Bukigu-Bukigu-kun instead of Kaken. Izuku blinks. Oh. He giggles, then his eyes widen and he groans. Oh, God, wait. What? Todoroki asks. Izuku sighs, beginning to pull away. I should go make sure Kaken's